Here's a strange fact about WCW Uncensored 1998. Almost every single wrestling reviewer who's ever covered this show agrees on the exact same thing. The first 8 matches range from solid to genuinely great. And yet, ask anyone who remembers this pay-per-view, and the first word out of their mouth is disaster. So today, we're doing something a little different. We're not just reviewing this show, we're figuring out exactly how a card this good got buried by its own main event, because the answer says a lot about where WCW was heading in 1998, months before it started losing to WWE for the first time in years. If you like these deep dive, what actually went wrong breakdowns, subscribing helps this channel keep making them. Go ahead and tap it now before we get into the evidence. March 15th, 1998, Mobile Civic Center, Mobile, Alabama. Roughly 7,475 fans in the building. Tony Schiavone, Bobby Heenan, and Mike Tenay on commentary. And right out of the gate, this show does something WCW's PPVs weren't always great at in this era. It opens hot. Booker T defends the WCW Television Championship against Eddie Guerrero, with Chavo Guerrero at ringside, and it's a genuinely strong way to kick things off. Booker retains, and after the match, Eddie turns his frustration on his own nephew, laying Chavo out. Small moment, but it's the kind of storytelling touch that shows WCW's mid-card was doing real work in 1998, even while the main event scene was starting to rot. Then Juventud Guerrera takes on Conan in a special challenge match, really just a straight-up match dressed in fancier language, built around Juvie feeling betrayed that Conan had aligned with the NWO instead of standing with the luchador ranks. Guerrera gets the win, and it sets an early WCW pattern that would repeat for years afterward. Lose your mask in a big match, and WCW pushes you right after. Juvie had dropped his mask to Chris Jericho at Super Brawl the month before, and here he is already climbing back up. Speaking of Jericho, he defends the Cruiserweight Championship against Dean Malenko next, winning by submission with the Lion Tamer. And here's a small but genuinely interesting detail most casual fans miss. After the match, Gene Okerlund comes out and essentially rubs it in, reminding Malenko on camera that he'd now lost across 4 consecutive pay-per-views. Malenko's one-word answer when asked where he goes from here? Home. It's a tiny moment, but it's the kind of subtle characterization that made this era of WCW's cruiserweight division so compelling. Real storylines with real stakes, even in matches that weren't headlining the show. Lex Luger takes on Scott Steiner next in a grudge match, and by most accounts, this is where the card's first real dip happens. Short, rough around the edges, decided when Rick Steiner runs in to distract his own brother, letting Luger land his loaded forearm for the win. Not a disaster on its own, but a noticeable step down in quality from the first 3 matches. And then the show snaps right back into form with what most reviewers then and now single out as the best match on the entire card, a triple threat for the United States Championship between Diamond Dallas, Page, Raven, and Chris Benoit. This one has everything. Genuine 3-way chaos, real near falls, and a finish where Benoit sets up a superplex on Raven through a table, only for Page to knock Benoit off the top rope and finish Raven with a diamond cutter through that same table for the pin. If you're only watching one match from this entire show, virtually every reviewer agrees this is the one. Here's a question worth pausing on. If the first 5 matches on a card are ranging from good to genuinely great, how does a show like this end up remembered as one of the worst pay-per-views WCW ever put out? The cracks start showing in match 6, a rematch between the Giant and Kevin Nash. Their previous encounter had ended with Nash botching a jackknife powerbomb and legitimately dropping the Giant on his head, a move so dangerous it got banned afterward and then strangely reinstated specifically for this rematch. The match itself ends in a disqualification when Bryan Adams runs in and cracks the Giant with a baseball bat. Functional, but it's the first match on the card that feels like an afterthought rather than a real contest. Bret Hart versus Kurt Hennig follows, with Rick Rude at ringside to even the odds against Hart. It's a competent, old-school, technical match. Hennig works the knee for most of it. Hart eventually reverses a sunset flip into the sharpshooter for the submission win around the 14-minute mark. Solid professional, but, by most accounts, a noticeable step down from the peak of Hart and Hennig's earlier encounters in the early 90s. Then comes the World Heavyweight Championship match, Sting defending against Scott Hall, who'd earned this shot by winning the previous year's World War III Battle Royal. And this is where the autopsy really starts revealing something uncomfortable. This is a world title match, and it's treated almost like filler. The commentary spends more time discussing the main event and speculating about tension between Hall and Hogan than actually building this match up. Sting wins, reversing Hall's outsider's edge into a Scorpion death drop for the pin, a fine finish. But multiple contemporary reviews describe the entire match as feeling like a mid-card Nitro bout that happened to have a world title attached to it. When your world championship match is the appetizer for something else, that's usually a warning sign about where a company's priorities actually sit. Quick pause before we get to the crime scene itself. If you've made it this far, drop a comment telling me if you've ever actually sat through this main event, because I genuinely want to know how many people remember it the way I'm about to describe it. And now, the main event. The reason this entire show earned its reputation. Hollywood Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage, a steel cage match, framed as the blow-off to their NWO tension and a callback to their WrestleMania 5 collision nearly a decade earlier. On paper, a huge deal. In execution, one of the most poorly constructed main events in WCW pay-per-view history. The match itself runs a slow, repetitive 14 minutes. Hogan throws Savage into the cage. Savage throws Hogan into the cage. Repeat before the finish completely falls apart. The Disciple runs in, knocks out both referees, and physically pulls Hogan out of harm's way just as Savage is about to hit a top rope elbow drop. Savage climbs down to confront Hogan and the Disciple, and then, almost randomly, Sting rappels down from the rafters into the cage, despite having already walked to the ring earlier in the night for his own title match. There's a tense standoff, and then Savage clotheslines Sting, spits at Hogan, and walks off, declaring that despite everything, he's still NWO for life. No bell rings, no winner is announced. It's ruled a no contest, and the crowd, by every account from that night, was completely checked out by the time it happened. Here's the actual conclusion of this autopsy. This wasn't a case of WCW forgetting how to build good wrestling matches. The undercard proves they absolutely still knew how. The Page Raven Benoit three-way alone is proof of that. This was a case of priorities. Every ounce of creative attention on this show went toward protecting Hogan's spot at the top of the card, even when it meant sacrificing an actual world title match to filler status and closing the show with a main event that had no real ending because nobody could agree on who should look strong walking out of it. Less than a month after this show aired, WWE's Raw beat WCW's Nitro in the ratings for the first time in years, and if you're looking for an early symptom of the disease that eventually killed WCW, this main event is basically a textbook case. So here's the honest final verdict. As a full show, WCW Uncensored 1998 deserves way more credit than its reputation suggests. Genuinely one of the stronger top-to-bottom undercards WCW put together that year. But as a statement about where the company's decision-making was heading, that main event is exactly the disaster people remember it as. What do you think? Does a great undercard redeem a genuinely botched main event? Or does one bad ending sink an entire show for you? Let me know in the comments. And if you want the next What Actually Went Wrong WCW breakdown the moment it's live, make sure you're subscribed. There's a lot more of this era still worth digging into.